Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker-Hagan, and I have my co-host.
And good evening, Dr. J.R. Thicklin here, and just so excited to be here on this beautiful Tuesday. And I'm telling you, I'm excited. We're in the third Tuesday of the month? Well, time is passing on.
Yeah, it's going quite quickly. And tonight we're navigating life, love, and relationships. Oh my goodness,
Absolutely.
we're flowing into February quickly. And February we talk about relationships all month long, and people are always excited about that because people want answers. They want to know how to navigate in relationship. Navigate means to create a path so that you can get to that final destination that you're trying to get to.
Well, that's very important because the fact, it's not always as easy said as done because you talk about not only navigating life, but also love and relationships. And we would like to think they are all one nice threefold cord, but it doesn't always come that way. And so, therefore, being able to have the right concepts and precepts and principles are very critical in this time to be able to successfully do this.
Absolutely. And also, Dr. J, this is a very critical year we're in. It's election year,
Oh,
and
most
things
definitely.
are getting crazy right now. So I know the viewers that are looking right now are trying to figure out, which direction to go because it will change our lives for the next 4 years. You're talking about relationship and love, but let me tell you, if life is going to be tossed upside down, it's going to be a whole lot of navigating we're going to have to go through.
And you're exactly right because it challenges us also to understand that it won't be a straight line. There's going to be some paths, there's going to be some crooks, there's going to be some turn. Sometimes we're going to have to do the two-step, because the fact in order to navigate, we have to almost abandon this thought process that everything is going to be perfect. Even in coming into meeting someone, it's not going to always be perfect. So the fairy tale that you may be actually excluding yourself from great opportunities because you're waiting on the perfect. And so don't let
Mhm.
perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah, there is no perfect. I don't care. You can be in love with that person. The Bible tells us that love covers a multitude of sins. And we know that is to the extent where you love someone so much that is unconditional, because there will be situations that will arise where one or both of you may fall to sickness or some type of disease or some kind of incapacity that no longer allows you to function as you did at one point. So, what are you going to do if life hits you unaware? Where does a love go? How do you build that relationship from turmoil?
You know, you just said a mouthful. You know why? Because you're exactly right. It's so easy to try to imagine everything being perfect and everything remaining the same, but it's not going to remain the same. So when all else fail, the foundation of really understanding love, understanding really what that means and how that becomes this covenant between the two of you, that you recognize the fact that, it's kind of like I'm in it to win it. I'm not here for the cosmetics of it, because if we live long enough, there are things going to change on us. It's just life itself. It changes. But when life changes, just like season changes, just like circumstances changes, we have to be in a position mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and I dare even say financially, but that in this case is probably the least of it, to be able to navigate life's turns. What happens when there's this unexpected thing to take place? What happened when you was planning a vacation and all of a sudden something happened that throws off that whole plan? Are we able to navigate, or is the vacation bigger than love? Is the thing I wanted to do bigger than the fact of us being able to go together? Because you often hear me say, life is like a tea bag. It isn't worth anything until it goes through some hot water. And so when we go through that hot water, it's the thing that teaches us how to navigate life, love, and relationships.
Dr. J, we will go through some hot water. We will go through some temptations. We will go through some trials. If you keep living this life, you will go through. It's not a question of when or if or why do I have to go through this? Life is just that. It's life. It happens, and it happens unaware. You can't plan for situations to happen. It just happens in a split second. Everything can be changed. And, how do you navigate through that? Especially if you're a single person and you're walking this path. How do you grab hold of something when you feel you have nothing? Because so many men and women, they don't have a partner that they're sharing life with, and when they find themselves in situations that where they're cut off, they seem like all is lost and they lose hope because they figure, well, I will never be able to experience the love that I see on TV, or the love my parents had, or the love my sister had. So they count themselves out and go into a depression. But life doesn't stop just because a situation happens to you.
You're exactly right, Dr. Val, because what seems to happen is this. We end up with this picture in our mind of what we want and what we think it should be. The problem is what it might take to bring that into reality may be a series of things that may be somewhat adversarial, that may be painful. And we've got to be willing to stand on our foundation. What is our foundational thinking? What are the principles that
Mm,
we stand on? Because, see, that's what guide us. We call them guiding principles because they shape the way we see life. It shapes our narrative. It shapes those things that happen to us. It is those principles. Too often, what happens, we abandon principles and we begin yielding to experience. What? Sometimes negative experiences. Sometimes we magnify what has happened to us that was so painful. And what happens then, we then develop these protective factors. Protective factors. So we made up our mind, I'm not going to let anybody do this. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let that happen. And so guess what? We've got so many, if you would, so many guard gates up. We have so many, if you would, so many barriers up that we wouldn't recognize love, opportunity, if it slapped us in the face, because the
right.
protective factors has us acting out of our pain. The protective factors having us acting out of our pain rather than standing on our principles. And that's why we have to have the guiding principles inside of that, which means understanding. You talk about compassion. You talk about empathy. You talk about communication, honest communication. Let me say that again with a big H, honest communication. One of the problems when we're getting to know each other is that we begin to say what we think the other person wants to hear. We begin
Mhm.
to share what we think the other person wants to hear. And if we're not careful, depending on that other person's experience, you know what they do? They become the chameleon. They start then trying to conform into what you've said, but it's not really
Exactly.
who they are. And so,
It's not authentic.
exactly, it's not authentic. So that when real situations start happening in a relationship, guess what? They can't keep that up because it is not in line with their processes. It's not in line with the way they think. It's not in line with this. So they become exhausted, they become frustrated, and all of a sudden things begin to unwind. And that's the difference between really, when if you're going to navigate, you've got to have some solid principles in which you're standing on. It doesn't mean that I expect the other person to be perfect, because guess what? Last time I checked, I wasn't perfect neither. But what it does mean is that I have the temperament, right? One of the fruit of the spirit. I have a temperament to be able to deal, to be able to shift. How do I bend in the curve? How do I go through things with you? Because that also reveals character. When you see a person who is resilient, a person who's been knocked down, but they get up, a person who's not going to just lie there in depression, a person there who recognizes not how many times I've been knocked down, but it's how many times I've gotten up. Now you're dealing with a proven commodity. But if you are so busy in your protective factor that, listen, you start eliminating people because they've had a past. You start eliminating people because the fact they've had a hurt. You're looking at the fall. You're not looking at the fact that they've overcome and have risen to something. This person may be just the right person because they now have the capacity. They understand resilience. They understand they don't just throw in the towel every time. And that could be exactly what you want, but you have to determine, am I more concerned about those things, or am I more concerned about the material things? I'm more concerned about what the optics look like. I'm concerned about that. And that's really an internal thing. If we're going to navigate, let me say, If we're going to navigate, we're going to have to either determine we're going to use our love life GPS, or we're going to use our past pain MapQuest, and that's just as
Hmm. Yeah, with Dr. J, you talked a lot about relationship and expectations in a relationship, one to another, but I don't think a lot of people understand what love really is, because sometimes individuals are brought up in a situation where love wasn't expressed to them, so they don't know how to show it. Um, Love is an emotional contract between two people or more, where your heart says, your heart says, I'm willing to do and give of myself for this other person unconditionally. I don't care what he may look like. I don't care what is going on in that life space. I'm going to stand by their side regardless, because I love them. I have tied my emotions into this person, and I want them to grow, and I want to grow with them. And I was looking at something one day, and this person was saying that their breath was taken away because that person left or was leaving, and they said, no, you have your own breath. I need you to breathe for me. And I
Wow.
thought that
Wow.
was so powerful, because of the fact that sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we forget to breathe. And when I
Wow.
say forget to breathe, we forget who we are and why we are here. We lose ourselves so much so till we're looking for that, light to shine down from heaven and say, this is the man I want for you, and this is the woman I have for you. When God is saying, I've given you someone to complement who you are, to take you to that next level so that you can build from the foundation of the two becoming one. And a lot of people don't want to buy into that because of the fact that they're selfish, they're self centered, and they want it all to be about them. I'm looking for my king, and my king's going to do this, my king is going to do that. Well, what are you bringing to the table?
Dr. Val, you said a lot, but let me say something. That's about 2 hours worth of show right there, even starting with the breathing part. So oftentimes people, we're going through the motion. We're just going through the motion. We're going through the action of life, but we don't take time to breathe. If you ever
Mhm.
notice when there's a crisis or when a person is overwhelmed or when things happen, one of the first pieces of advice that is given, even from the medical staff, is what? Stop, breathe,
Breathe.
take a deep breath. Why? Because there needs to be a cleansing, if you would. There need to
Mhm.
be a cleansing. There need to be a reorientation of your energy and what's happening there. Because at the time you can become overwhelmed. We've heard of people, we heard the term hyperventilating. Oftentimes that is because we're overwhelmed. We have not taken life
Overwhelmed.
in. And so think about this. Even a scripture says that in him we live, we move, and we have our being. There are people, sometimes we're not living, we're just existing.
Existing.
We're just existing. So when we're just existing, we're missing out on a great opportunity to live. If we're waiting on the perfect to happen instantly, then guess what? We are delaying and forfeiting our destinies. Because you don't wait. Watch this. It goes back to the saying, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. And so you cannot live up under the pain of what you've been through. And what happens, I love the way you phrase that, because too often we feel this sense of entitlement that because I've gone through this and because I've gone through that, that's right. I expect the next person to just sweep me off my feet and be my love slave, to be,
Hmm.
oh, no, it doesn't work that way. No one else should have to pay for your past pain.
Absolutely.
No one should be required to step in to pay for what has happened to you. You have to be able to take the lessons that you've learned through the thing you've gone through and use it to your advantage. And having said that, I want to welcome comments from any of the audience there. Please, if you're watching by way of Facebook or live, please in the comment section, let us know that you're there, because this is
Or
reality.
if you have any questions or something that you want us to elaborate and speak on further, because
Absolutely.
there's so much. There is so much, and we're going to do a 30 minutes with this, so it's so much that we want to cover. But we want to make sure that we give you what you need in this moment, so that you can carry that until you see us again on the next show. But a lot of people say they want to be in a relationship, they want to get married, but what preparations have you made? Have you decluttered your heart and your mind and your spirit to receive that other person into your life? Before my husband and I got married, you know, I thought about, okay, we moving in together, and I looked in my closet one day, and my closet was full. And I was saying, I had to think, what was it that I was willing to give up to make more space? And the
Right.
reason why that was important to me was it began here in my mind, and then it went here.
Absolutely.
What baggage am I willing to unpack so that new clothes can come in, a new person can come into me? What do I need to unpack so that that baggage won't carry over? Because there were some things hanging up there that it didn't need to be there anyway, because why? I had outgrown them. So
Wow.
there's times where you will outgrow yourself emotionally,
Hmm.
and you have to be open to the possibility of more. People
Wow.
say they won't want more, but they're not open to the possibility of more.
You said so much there, and basically, when you're saying you, you had to make room, you had to make room for what you were expecting. In other words, it's being able to just say, well, we're going to get married. That most people, when they say that, you know what they're thinking of? They're thinking of a wedding, even if there's not a wedding. They just think, we're going to come together. It's more than the event. It's more than the event. You got to understand, the wedding is really for you. It's for your guests. That's what it's really for. It's for your witness. But
I
it is
keep
the
telling my husband that, because he's still upset to this day that we didn't get a chance to enjoy our wedding. He still complains about the fact that we didn't have a chance to dance and do everything, because we were taking pictures and greeting people. And I was
yes.
like, it's okay. We have the rest of our lives. He was like, yeah, but I wanted to get in on the party.
Wow. And that's interesting, because guess what? That's exactly what happened when guests and family and friends are there. They're celebrating, witnessing the coming together. But the reality is that you and your spouse, you're going to enjoy the marriage. You're going to enjoy
Yeah.
the marriage. And in order to do that, you just said it, you have to make room. You have to prepare. You can no longer think in a selfish, singular way. It's no longer just about me. It's about us. How do we have us language? How do we have language where I'm now considerate? Because that's exactly what happens. There's got to be a consideration for one another. Don't be so pessimistic that you pessimize yourself out of a possibility. In other words, you're thinking, always assuming the negative. You're assuming this is going to fall apart. You're assuming no. Rather than assume the negative, prepare for the positive. Prepare for the things that needs to happen. Have a real conversation with yourself. Stop always reflecting and rehearsing your past pain. Whatever you keep rehearsing, you hear me say this every week. Whatever we rehearse or whatever we nurture, that is what we perfect, and that's what grows. If I continue to nurture my pain, my past failure, that's what's going to grow. And so out of that, I could be resentful. I could be so terrified that I self sabotage anything that looked like a relationship. I self
Well, Dr.
sabotage
J,
it.
well, Dr. J, what you're saying is really good. But what I want to interject is, if you feeling that way and you're so broken and so hurt and you're bringing your baggage in, then you don't need to be in a relationship at all.
No, it's a healing phase that you still need to go through.
You
Because
don't
once
need to
again,
be in a relationship at all, because hurt people hurt people.
right. And you can't afford, like I said, you can't punish people for your past. You can't hold them hostage for something that someone else did to you. Neither can you expect them to be the rescuer of those things. Keep
And a
that in
lot
mind.
of people want that individual to be someone that they passed up, or that person walked away from them and they treated them a certain type of way, and they're looking to recapture that. And when they don't get it with that person that they're dating at the moment, they let that person go through hell because they're not that person they really want.
Well, you're exactly right. And I see a comment that says that hurt people choose to hurt people. That's both true and untrue, because here's the thing: the hurt people who have unresolved hurt and pain, they will hurt people because it's become their nature. Even
It's
in
their
their
nature.
defensiveness, it's in their sense of protection, they end up hurting other people. It's like self-sabotage. You'll see people that will self-sabotage. This person, I'm perfectly good. I think we're going somewhere. I'm very happy, and I thought we was headed a certain way. And all of a sudden, that person who have not resolved their hurt, just all of a sudden just sever everything,
Mhm.
shipwreck everything, start arguments from out of nowhere, do things that totally betray, and you try to figure out where did that come from, because I haven't dealt with my hurt.
Mhm.
I haven't dealt with my hurt. So it's almost like a preemptive strike. This is too good to be true. And so guess
Mhm.
what? I make it not true because of the fact I've not dealt with my hurt. Now, by the same token, in the original if you would, in the original proverb of that, not biblical proverb, where we say hurt people, by the same token, healed people heal people.
Mhm.
People that are healed. Oh, they heal people because they have taken the lessons. They have taken the lessons from what they've gone through. And they recognize, guess what? Even in this case here, I'm not going to be so selfish. I'm not going to be so self-consumed. I'm not going to be that person who is so self-consumed that only person I think about is myself. You know, and that's very important, because there has to be a degree of selflessness if you're talking about walking
Mhm.
together. And Dr. Val, I think it's so important because we have such a diverse audience. Whatever principle you live by, the guiding foundation, that is what's going to govern you. And I say that for this reason here. Everybody don't live by a biblical principle. They have a
That is true.
philosophical they have a philosophical framework that may have been shaped by their culture, their upbringing, their sense of what roles are. Well, I believe that the woman's supposed to do this and the man's supposed to do that. But guess what? That may not always be the case, depending on the situation. Sometimes that role reversal because of situation. But you got to be good with that and be willing to navigate if we're headed toward the same goal and outcome. I like to say, stop getting folk back for what that happened to you. Stop getting them back. Stop. It's like you're striking out against your past. You're striking out, but you're striking someone new, and you're causing them to pay for things. And I mean, Dr. Val, there's so much that could be said about that. And sometimes, and the reason why I say that, because sometimes a person have learned to cope, but they've had unhealthy coping mechanism. It's like the woman who made up her mind that I'm gonna get everything out of this man that I can get out of him. I'm going
Mhm.
to manipulate him. I'm going to maneuver him. I'm going to do all that. I'm going to keep him guessing. I'm going to do all of those things because that's their ideal of power.
Right. Right.
That's the ideal of power,
It,
control, and
well, and that eliminates love.
exactly.
That eliminates love, because if you love someone, you're not going to willfully do things to hurt or cripple them in a way where they feel uncomfortable even being with you. I was doing a study last week, and the study was talking about brides, and I
Yeah.
was reading the story about the Galileans and how they did preparations when they were chosen, when the father and the groomsmen would come, and they would go to the bride and her father, and they would make a pact, they would make a covenant,
Wow.
and
Exactly.
to marry, and they would separate and they wouldn't see each other and communicate. But that bride, while she was waiting for her husband to build that house and to put
Yes.
finances in place, she prepared herself. She prepared herself to be a wife. She prepared herself to be a mother. She prepared herself to be a confidant to that man, so that when he came, and why I know she was all of those things, because she eagerly sat waiting for his return. How
Exactly.
many women would eagerly wait for their man to come back. There's so many soldiers gone off the wall, men and female have gone off the wall. How many have put their selves under subjection for that person they love, and they occupied until they came? And what I mean by occupied, they worked on themselves so that
Right.
when that person came back, they were prepared. If they came back maimed, if they came back torn, they were healed, so healed themselves till they became a healer. That person that they were waiting on was part of their ministry
Wow. Now
to
that's
help
powerful.
bring them into the fold. So, whatever person that you're with, you should be each other's ministry. When you're broken, he's able to lift you up and say, "Where does it hurt?" When she's broken, vice versa, the same thing should be each other's ministry, where you hold each other up. That says, no matter what wind blows, if there's a hurricane and it tears our house down, we still got each other.
Dr. Val, you said so much there, because even when you're talking about the preparation while waiting, inside of that, I like to think in this day and time, in this part of my life, having gone through so many things that I have, that you know what? This is the best version that I've ever been. What do you mean? The best version that I've ever been, the best version, VERSION, that I've ever been. Why? Because you have to do your reflections.
Hmm. Hmm.
You have to do the accountability. You have to identify the cracks and the kinks in your armor. You have to understand, listen, it's easy to look at who hurt you and what happened and all those things, but you cannot do a thorough job until you turn that light on yourself and examine yourself. In other words, why did I allow it to happen? What made me conducive to that? Am I repeating any of those same steps? I need to have this introspective look, and I need to be dedicated to self-improvement. In other words, how do I become my best version of myself? I've told you many times, one of the worst phrases that I hate hearing, and nobody means any harm, when you haven't seen a person for a while and they say these words, "Boy, you haven't changed a bit." That I run from that. Why? Because I know what they mean. A lot of times they're talking about externally. Sometimes they talk about personality. But for me, that's not a good phrase, because I want there to be a visible, a notable change, a change in attitude, a change in mindset, a change in pursuit, a change inside of those things. The maturity is now kicking in. Why? Because I now have proof that I didn't just go through, but I've grown through what I've gone through. And so I'm a better version of myself, because I didn't sit there pouting and complaining the whole time about, oh, it's me. What happened? Somebody done me wrong, love song. No, no. You've got to work on yourself. And that's the thing about it. How are we going to pray, Lord, give, Lord, give, and we don't prepare ourselves? We don't prepare ourselves. It is to say that I'm good. I'm good. That person need to work on themselves. No. And then the other part of that is, Dr. Val, is we have to ask ourselves a question. When do we declare that we have arrived? When do we declare that I've learned all I need to know? When do we declare that, hey, enough is enough? I'm good right here. Are we open to learning? Because
We're
here's the thing:
forever learning, Dr.
we're
J.
forever,
I
and
don't
we
I,
should be.
I don't care how old you are, you will forever
You
be
better believe it.
learning. And one of the ways to prepare and navigate through life is to actually accept the fact that you need some help.
Exactly.
Be
So,
open to help.
mhm.
There's so many people that have mental problems going on because of devastation of a loss, uh,
Yeah.
be, or because they were traumatized as a child, or they were
Mhm.
traumatized in another relationship. You have to be open to the possibility of getting some counseling of some sort. People feel like you go get counseling that there's something wrong with you mentally. And a lot of times there are something wrong with people
Exactly.
mentally, but you have to be open to the possibility as I'm not okay where I am.
Exactly. And there's
And if I'm
safety in
functioning
to
in a
help.
capacity where I'm hurting people or I'm leaving a trail behind me and I keep going into relationship after relationship and it's not working out, the common denominator is, guess what? You.
Exactly. And we must be willing to deal with that. You often hear me say, I've said it when we talk about not only domestic violence, but other things. We cannot change that which we're unwilling to confront. We cannot confront that which we're unwilling to identify. We cannot identify that which we're unwilling to acknowledge, and we cannot acknowledge that which we're unwilling to accept. So, inside of that, this is not a judgment of you. This is a reflection that you reflect yourself and say, I need help. I don't care what. I need help. I need someone to come alongside. I need counsel. I need someone to help put things in order. And sometimes, and you and I both know this as counselors, people come to you and they're talking to you, and sometimes all you was doing was listening, but they needed that opportunity to hear themselves, to be able to hear themselves, to be able to look at it and now be able to organize their thought, recognize and identify those things inside of them, being able to admit that, man, I still feel angry, or feel entitled, or I feel betrayed. Because listen, it doesn't mean, listen, this is not some type of a, how do I put it? This is not some type of a diagnosis that's going to take you out of here. No, it's a matter of recognizing I need help. I've identified some things, and I not only need help, I want help, and I won't stop until I get help,
Mhm.
because I don't want to remain the same way that I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. The real problem is when people won't cry out for help, when people won't get help, and they just end up being a Tasmanian devil. They keep spinning around and destroying everything in their path because they haven't dealt with things, abandonment issues, all those things, mistrust. You get in a new relationship, and you feel like you got to covet somebody. You got to stay on top. Where you going? Where you going back? Why it took you so long? Well, what's going on? Maybe I'm still dealing with some trust issues. Maybe
And
maybe I'm
some people just want control. It has nothing to do with that. Some people just want control, and it's how they've been raised that they feel that dominance is the power and the way to go in every situation. And that's not the way to go, because, like I said, if you love someone, love gives and takes. It's not always taking, and demanding. So,
exactly.
and if you're in a situation like that, you don't need to be in that situation,
Yeah.
because guess what? It stops you from your purpose, it stops you from your destiny, and no one should have that much power till it stops you from becoming.
Well, I think that was a key word there, becoming. That word
Mhm.
become. Notice that word become is a continuous. Become. I mean, it's the same word that I believe is used in 2 Corinthians 5:17. If any man be in Christ, they are a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things what? Become new. That means that there is a process, there's a progression. There are things that are changing because of the fact there are things in order. Understand that word is very much related to the, if you would, it related to the word there in the New Testament, transform. Transform come from
Transform. There
transform
should
come from the
always
Greek.
be
Right.
transformation.
Yeah. The word transform comes from the Greek word metamorphosis, where we get metamorphosis. So that means that there has to be a movement. There has to be a constant. We are becoming. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly, and sometimes because of the fact that we have not dealt with past things, it stops our transformation because we stop and we land on that pain. We land there, or we become crippled, or watch this. We want somebody's sympathy, but not their empathy. We want
Mhm.
someone to feel sorry for us, but not anyone who can stand with us and come alongside us and help guide us along the way. So those things are crucial. And I say that because it ain't got nothing to do with how fine you are, how pretty you are, not at all. I mean, you can still be tore up from the floor up and pretty. You can be tore up on the floor up and rich. You can be tore up from the floor up and you're affluent. But what's projecting, what's coming out of you is toxicity. And let me say this, it doesn't just hurt someone else, but in reality, it's also hurting you.
Absolutely. It's breaking you down so that you won't be able to exist in your environment that you're in. And it creates a strong level of toxicity where it's like, and some people have that Jekyll and Hyde mentality. They have this light that they show around other people, but behind closed doors, they're mean and wicked and in a fetal position at night because they can't deal with the demons that they possess inside that are tormenting them. Because when there's no way in the world that you can say that you love someone and you don't feel some kind of way when you know you've done that person wrong. You can't
Yeah.
just sweep that under the rug. You just can't be like, well, I'm just going to pray and hopefully they'll forgive me and forget that I did this thing to them, or I said this, or I acted like this. You can't do that. You have to confront your own fears, your own demons, your own way of life, and realize and accept the fact that we all need help. Nobody's perfect, but if two people that are striving to walk in perfection can come together and build from there, then you have, as they say, a match in heaven. Life is getting ready to take us on a whole roller coaster ride this dispensation.
Absolutely.
As I said, we're going through an election year, and they're going to be combatedness all across the globe. And you got to learn how to stand in your own truth. You have to learn how to stand in your own power. Otherwise, you will be shifted like wheat. You won't be able to stand in a relationship that you feel that there is love if you're not standing in truth. You won't be able to be in a relationship if you're not standing in truth. Truth begins with each one of us individually, because of the fact that when calamity comes, we'll be able to stand and withstand the storm. Just like we go through hurricanes here in South Florida, we prepare. We
Absolutely.
have shutters that we put up on our windows and doors. We put in our plants so they won't get harmed. We stock up with food. This is preparations that we need to do. We need to be watching as well as praying. Everybody's like, I want to be in love. I want to do this and that. But what are you preparing for?
Yeah.
Are you preparing to meet that woman or meet that uh, man that is going to add to your life? Not take away, not control, not manipulate. Are you in a position where you can come together and build something as one? And it doesn't matter if one has more than the other, if you both have something that you're working towards. This is why God's word talks about the two becoming one and being able to walk forward in a union. So, are you willing to do that?
It's funny that you say that because everything that we talk about love, we know that we find the basis of it in First Corinthians 13. And so what happens sometimes people desire love, but they're not willing to unfold or avail themselves to the process of what makes me ready for it, what prepares me to be able to watch this, to not only just receive, but to give. Because I'm still trying to protect myself. Watch this. And sometime, and I know this is not going to be popular with some people, but sometime what we'll do, we'll surround ourselves with stuff. We'll do a whole bunch of things. I got this, I got that. You got all those things. But you know what? In the words of that great prophet, that late great prophet Luther, you know, a chair is still a chair, even if ain't nobody sitting there. But he goes on and said, a house is not a chair. In a house, it's not a home if there's no one there. And so
Nobody's there.
nobody's there. And so here's the thing about it. We have to ask ourselves a question. Why isn't anyone there?
Mm.
Have I prepared myself?
Wow. Wow.
Have I prepared myself? Or have I made up my mind? I'm all right. Here's my trinkets. I'm going to be good by myself. I'm going to be. No, truly, if that's your heart desire, I believe that God will give us our heart desire. But I do
Yes.
believe that there's preparation that's going on. Not one moment do you reach the place where you say, well, that's it. That's all. Take me or leave me. No, 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 no. Before you say that just too quickly, what about an attitude that, God, I'm just open for you to shape me? One of the prayers I pray daily, Dr. Val, is God, help me to learn my lessons from yesterday. God, just because I was ignorant yesterday doesn't mean I have to be ignorant today. Okay. Help me not to wallow in my pain of yesterday. Help me to rise up. Let me learn my lessons from what I've gone through. Once again, you often hear me say it's not enough to go through if we don't grow through. Growing through is called maturity. It's about authentic. What is it that I really desire and want? And am I willing to get out of my own way? Get out of my own way. Because I'm telling you, there's nothing worse than self-sabotage. Nothing worse than that. because you have nobody to blame but you, me, myself, and I. But if I'm willing to understand, what, listen, I'm so open to what you want. Don't let good be the enemy of, don't let great be the enemy of good. Don't let great be the enemy of good. God is saying, perhaps I placed this person in your life to help smooth those rough edges, to help you over some things. But you know what? Perhaps I've placed this person in your life for you to help smooth their rough edges, to do some things. No, God, I want them perfect. I want them already set. I want them perfect. Really, do you now? Do you now? So you want to reap where you have not sown. You want a finished product. Hmm. Then what is your role in that life? What is it that you're bringing to it? If it's already finished, just a thought to think about.
Absolutely.
So it's about
Absolutely.
navigating life, love, and relationship. Navigating life decisions, things that happen.
Decisions.
Yeah, decisions. That's what
Decisions.
it is. It is it's thing. And when we talk about relationship, we're not just talking about, husband, wife, that relationship. Sometimes relationship
All
has
relationships, even business relationships.
business
Have you
relationship.
prepared yourself and have anything to bring to that table to make that business flourish?
Yeah.
What
You know,
preparations are you doing? What monies have you invested? A lot of people want things to arise and materialize and they become wealthy, but they haven't invested anything. They haven't invested in themselves. They haven't invested in anybody else. But they want all this to materialize magically, and it does not. Everything requires a sacrifice, a seed of some type of thing.
exactly.
Action. It takes an action. You have to do something. That means you have to invest in it. You got to invest in that relationship if you want it to work. You don't just walk down the aisle and you run off on your honeymoon and come back, and then you walk in that house and then you sitting there twiddling your thumbs saying, okay, what's next? We not had the wedding. What's next? Life begins. Life begins as you two coming together. Can you imagine yourself after you come off that honeymoon? Can you imagine yourself once you open that door and walk through and life happens? You're beginning life as one. Can you imagine yourself there, or are you just looking at the formalities of the trip getting there?
Well, Dr. Val, you said a mouthful, and one thing that is so important is, once again, you talk about imagining, but you also talk about how life, preparing for life. You cannot afford to live an event driven life. You're just living for
Mm,
the next event. You're living for the next
wow.
big thing. No, you can't live a life based upon events, period. Because you've got to learn how to deal with each other. How to, I'm going to use this word, how to begin to navigate and be flexible with each other. Because the fact that you're two different individuals, there's already differences there. But the word different doesn't mean worse than or better than. It just simply means that we're different. But how do we find those commonalities? How do we find those things that we can work together through and navigate? And one of the things that we have to do, going back to where we started, we have to look at the principles that we believe in. Some people,
Mm.
you just need to eliminate some of this craziness that we see on reality TV.
Ah,
Reality TV has messed up a lot of people. You
I
see,
hate reality TV. When I see it coming across the television and they acting a fool, I'm like, this is not how our sisters need to be acting. This is not how real men really be acting. Why are we even entertaining this stuff?
we entertain it, and the fact that we're fed this stuff, because they'll start, I mean, I'm just going to call it out, marriage with medicine. Really? Well, you would think these are some of the most intellectual professional people and stuff, and they're acting as ignorant and acting as, if you would, uncontrolled, as a person who don't know anything. And so that
Mm.
becomes, really, that's what you're aspiring to be? Are you truly
I've not
aspiring to
watched
be?
it. I've not watched it, so I don't know. But if that's what is being displayed, as I said, it is what it says. Reality TV is not the real truth. It is not
No.
the reality of how they live everyday life. After the cameras are off, they go to bed. They get up in the morning, brush their teeth, wash their face just like everybody else. They're not jumping up and all glam and fabulous every day and every minute. That's the image that they want you to portray, and you can't expect that in a relationship, not while you're dating and certainly not while you're married.
You
There's
know,
a shift that happens. So, do you really want to get married? Everybody's like, we want to get married. Do you really, really want to get married? It took me years, almost 19 years, before I married again. And it wasn't because I didn't want to get married, because I loved being married, but I didn't like what went on in the marriage. And I wasn't ready to be exposed to that again if it went south. So I
well, you know,
enjoyed myself. I lived my life and I traveled the world, raised my children, and had a ball until I was ready. And when I was ready, I unpacked all of that. I unpacked the fact that, okay, I'll be traveling all around the world. I unpacked the fact that I'm going to be hanging out with my girlfriends and don't have to let nobody know where I am and don't have to tell where I'm going. I can't walk in and out of the house and just and then the person is wondering where I am. I unpacked all that because I knew at when you're saying that you're in a relationship, there's a certain type of commitment and respect that is supposed to be rendered one to another. And until you're ready to adapt that mindset and emotionally be emotionally available to that other person, then you're not ready to be in a relationship.
Dr. Val, you put it perfectly, and I thought that was so important. You know, and we keep saying, listen, don't get it twisted. The Real Housewives, I don't care if they're from Atlanta, or Potomac, or whatever, they're not Real Housewives at all. But allow your principles to be so that you're preparing to be a real, not necessarily housewife as we've understood it, but be a real wife, a real person, real husband. Prepare yourself to be a real husband, not this not this phony reality TV type thing that is so filled with all kinds of toxic thinking inside of those things. And so we have to be willing to put in the work. And definitely, as we're getting ready to close, we want to welcome your comments, or if you've gotten anything from it tonight, if there's anything that resonated to you tonight, just put in the comment that you learned something, or if you have a question, because it's important. We're not here just bumping our gum. This is actually important. I believe that in all
It's
things.
ministry.
Yeah,
It's
it
ministry.
is.
It,
You know,
Soul of the Woman is about reaching hearts and empowering lives, whether it be male or female. And you can find me on www.fromthesoulofAwoman.com, and you can see a lot of resources there. And also on my social media platforms, if you could subscribe to Hot Topics from the Soul, I greatly appreciate it. And Dr. Val Parker, Dr. Val Parker-Hagan, subscribe to all that. I greatly appreciate if you would follow me if you like what I'm saying. And Dr. J.R. Thinkley, here's his
I'm right.
information.
So jrthicklin.com, you can find me there. You can go to my YouTube page, Man of Purpose 2000. And not only that, folks, you can find us on different Facebook pages, not only J.R. Thicklin, Dr. J.R. Thicklin page, but there's so much that is out there. And I want to encourage someone. We want to encourage you tonight. Listen, it is not some far-fetched dream. It's not something that is out of your reach. I'm saying to you, as you prepare your heart, as you prepare your mind, don't talk yourself out of what God really might have for you. Don't let your preferences override, really, perhaps what is purpose for you. Don't do that to yourself, because you have to see yourself this. You bring value. You bring value. Expect value. And if you do such, you begin to set the framework for where you're going. And two words you used earlier, Dr. Val, you talked about being invested. You've got to make you got to make an emotional investment. You got to make an investment inside of whatever you're in. You cannot you cannot be always a person withdrawing. You got to also deposit. You're responsible for, if you would, I like saying, deposit into each other's love tank. Make those deposits that are there. Make those deposits. Don't withhold on those deposits because, well, yeah, you don't deserve it because I don't like the fact that that you slammed the door last week. Really? Well, you might slam the door next week, but you don't use it as a vice to control a person. So understand, if you're going to navigate, put on that good spiritual GPS. Navigate. Every now and then we come to dead ends, or we come to a place, and you know what? It could be an accident up the road. And you'll hear the GPS says, guess what? U-turn, a rerouting. Sometime we have to be rerouted, but we can only be rerouted when we're open to instructions, open to learning, open to growing. And that's really what the question is. If I'm going to navigate through life, love, and relationships, I must be open to being able to reroute.
Yes. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in and joining us on Hot Topics from the Soul. And I want to leave you with this: don't let yesterday's thoughts, baggage cloud your todays or your tomorrows. Every day, start anew, start fresh, and remember that love is always, always, always there and willing and open for whoever will receive it. So we thank you for joining us on Hot Topics from the Soul. Good night.
Good night.